From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Soini Gray. Ecuador's National Assembly has received the formal resignation of the Vice President Alejandra Vicuña. Our correspondent in Quito, Denise Herrera, has the details.
After the resignation of the ex-Vice President of Ecuador, Alejandra Vicuña, several reactions have been generated in the National Assembly. Lawmakers conclude that Vicuña has to face the justice. In light of these events, also, legal experts express that the Constitution said that the President or Vice President can be called to trial if they are in duties. So an impeachment here is not an option because Vicuña resigned, so she is not working more as Vice President. Also, experts said that there is a vacuum in the Constitution because the Constitution does not specify how a Vice President should submit a resignation. So they say that the institution which appointed her as a Vice President is the responsible to accept the resignation. However, the National Assembly, the President of the National Assembly, Elizabeth Cabezas, has confirmed that Vicuña resignation will be discussed by the National Assembly tomorrow during the plenary session. So we will see Moreno's decision in the coming days. It's all for now. Back to you at the studios.
Now, while there, Denise got responses to Vicuña's resignation from members of the Creole Opposition Party and from the Citizens' Revolution Party.
The current Ecuadorian constitution establishes that it is not possible to continue with trials to ex-political leaders once they have ended their duties. Once Ms. Vicuña has resigned, the political trial will not be applicable. However, her responsibilities in administrative and criminal liabilities are to continue.
The government is behind the departure of the Vice President Vicuña, for sure. The same government of Lenin Moreno, which withdrew its support. It was they who in the beginning supported her. They postulated her as vice presidential candidate in an internal vote, and they supported her with the social Christians who then elected her. They have to assume responsibility as well for what's to come now that she's left office.
The Nobel Peace Prize winner Adolfo Perez Esquivel has reached out to the Ecuadorian government because of his serious concern for the health of the former Vice President Jorge Glass. The Argentinian activist has sent a letter to President Lenin Moreno sharing his concern. Esquivel says the Ecuadorian government has a duty to take care of the former Vice President. Glass is in prison, facing charges of corruption, and has been on a hunger strike for more than 40 days. And Interpol has decided to reject the red notice for the arrest of the former Ecuadorian president, Rafael Correa. According to Interpol, the petition, which was submitted by the current Ecuadorian government, did not meet the requirements established by the organization. Correa, who now lives in Belgium, has argued that the request was politically motivated. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro is in Moscow for meetings with his Russian counterparts. The Venezuelan president took to Twitter to report on his day.
We're walking through the streets of Moscow. After a successful meeting with President Putin, we had many positive agreements in several areas such as financial, oil, defense, commercial, and many more. Tomorrow we will continue signing new great agreements. Right now it's already late in the evening. It's minus 10 degrees Celsius here. Warm greetings to the Venezuelan people. We will keep in touch and we will keep fighting for Venezuela, our motherland.
On Wednesday, the two leaders discussed ways of strengthening cooperation, including in new oil and gas agreements. The Venezuela-Russia Intergovernmental Commission, initiated under the former president, Hugo Chavez, has consolidated more than 260 agreements between the two countries. A Spanish court has ordered the 5 members of the Wolf Pack to 9 years in prison for sexual abuse. All over Spain, demonstrators took to the streets to reject what they say was a far too lenient sentence. The men were accused of assaulting and gang raping an 18-year-old in 2016 during the San Fermin festival. 2 out of the 5 judges said that the group had to be condemned for sexual aggression and should face 14 years in prison. Our correspondent in Spain, Adriana Cardoso, gives us more details about the protest against the sexual abuse sentence of the wolf pack.
We're standing in front of the Justice Ministry where protesters have gathered, calling for tougher sentences for the so-called wolf pack. The 5 men were each handed 9-year prison sentences for sexual abuse, but they were acquitted of the more serious charge of rape. The judges said there was no proof of violence and that it was unclear whether intimidation had taken place due to lack of force used against the 18-year-old victim. Under Spain's current law, an offense can only be classified as rape if there is evidence of violence or intimidation, such as being threatened with a knife or being physically hit. 2 judges on the 5-member, all-male panel disagreed with the decision, saying that the gang had committed rape. They, therefore, urged for tougher sentences. However, all 5 judges agreed that the filming of the attack violated the victim's privacy and ordered the lower court to issue a sentence for the offense. The case and the sentencing has sparked fresh protests, with demands for better justice and an end to what they describe as patriarchal justice.
And we head to Argentina, where women are protesting against a court's decision on the rape and murder of the teenager Lucia Perez. Outrage spread in the country as the 3 accused were found not guilty on November 28. The court said that their guilt could not be proven despite the fact that they offered drugs to Lucia and they took her to their home. Feminist groups say this is additional proof of the lack of a gender perspective within the judiciary. And earlier we spoke to the Argentinian journalist and activist Jimena Schenker, who joined us to speak about this case and also about the feminist movements around Latin America and the rest of the world.
Una Menos was born in 2015 in Argentina because of another femicide against teenagers named Chiara Paez. And that is the movement is growing around the continent and around the world. And that's why we are thinking that this is not going to stop. It is going to grow no matter if judicial authorities or the government are not taking enough policies to protect women in our countries.
Women's organizations have protested against macho fascism in politics at the COP24 in Poland. One organization called the Women Gender Constituency Group used a performance to protest against macho culture. They say the conservative trend is affecting people around the world and called for women to rise up against it. World leaders have met in Poland for the 2-week-long climate change summit.
Because we're very much concerned that in these halls and as it is all over the world, we see the rise of macho fascism, right-wing politicians, right-wing governments.
Now this morning we were joined by our correspondent Watma Ma Kokoba, who gave us details about how the COP24 summit negotiations are unfolding in Poland.
Other countries are saying, especially countries that produce coal, like Poland here where the COP24 is happening, are saying if there is to be just transition, there has to be some consideration into some social issues like employment. There has to be some consideration into some social and economic issues so that the transition, it doesn't have to affect the lives of people. So people are still debating and trying to come up with a way of making sure that if this is going to happen like sustainably, there has to be some ways of making sure that it does not affect the lives of people who are employed especially in the core sector.
The family of the murdered Argentine activist Santiago Maldonado has rejected the judiciary's decision to end all investigations regarding his case. Officials said Maldonado drowned, but his family says that he was the victim of a forced disappearance. Our correspondent Edgardo Esteban has those details.
The family of Santiago Maldonado gave a press conference alongside human rights organizations and social movements to reject the resolution of Judge Gustavo Yeral, who decided to close the investigations into the case of Santiago Maldonado. Santiago's body was found near Riverbank in October 2017 after he had disappeared for more than 70 days. His mother said the judge is caving to the government's pressure and insisted the family only wants to know the truth about what happened to him.
We'll take a short break now, but we'll have more news in a minute. Welcome back. The authorities in Tijuana, Mexico are cracking down on activists who are trying to distribute humanitarian aid around shelters. Our correspondent in Tijuana, Pablo Perez, brings us the details on the migrant situation at the border.
Approximately 500 people remain here outside of what was the first shelter in Tijuana, Sports Center Benito Juarez. Meanwhile, another 200 people were transferred to the shelter El Barretal. Many people do not feel safe in that shelter due to the danger in the vicinity where the center is located, so they have decided to remain here. Humanitarian aid from different organizations have been banned in order to allow authorities to force the transfer of migrants to the other shelter. Police have tried to arrest a number of activists who tried to bring food to these people who are now living in the streets as the Benito Juarez is closed.
Mexican researchers are interested in the migratory phenomenon that has led thousands to seek asylum at the border at northern Mexico.
Mexican social experts have been researching the Central American exodus for 16 days. After traveling over 4,000 kilometers, migrants established themselves in Tijuana to apply for asylum in the United States.
Why does this number stand out, if in fact it represents a very small fraction of the people who travel through Mexico? I would answer that is because they are visible for the first time.
Researchers are trying to answer questions about the society lived in by the thousands of Central Americans at the border.
There's no proof that crime has risen because of these people. On the contrary, we see that this group has a lot of potential to integrate into this city's productive life.
Analyzing decisions taken before the migratory phenomenon, they are denouncing the lack of planning by the authorities.
A lot of actions are being improvised rather than planned. There is more capacity to house people in the Barretal, but that doesn't mean conditions are more dignified.
The xenophobic behavior expressed by a minority in Tijuana is also being studied. There is a specific cause behind it.
These demonstrations of rejection shows an inability on the part of the government to solve this issue.
Over 5,000 migrants are currently housed in shelters across Tijuana. They left their country seeking a dignified life. And today, they have to face the decisions of a frontier government that is just improvising.
Mexico's new president has proposed offering more work visas for Central Americans. He's also urging the United States to do the same. Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador's proposed investment in job creation is aimed at stemming the northward flow of migrants. He was speaking at a news conference where he also read the Riot Act to foreign and national oil companies. He is challenging them to pump oil quickly, or he says no further oil fields will be offered. And still in Mexico, the capital city's first female mayor has been sworn in. As a member of the country's left-wing Morena party, Claudia Sheinbaum has vowed to put an end to the persecution of the country's opposition. The new mayor is also a scientist and was part of the UN climate change panel that won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007.
Therefore, the first thing we will do is stop the abuse. From now on, democracy and political freedom are restored. Never again will we exercise or allow persecution and direct or stimulate violence against those who think and act in a way different to whoever is governing.
The Bolivian Electoral Court will allow Evo Morales to run for re-elections. Morales can now run in his party's primary elections ahead of presidential polls scheduled for 2019. The Bolivian Vice President, Alvaro Garcia Linero, will also be able to stand on that ticket. Our correspondent, Freddie Morales, tells us more.
Bolivian President Evo Morales and his Vice President Álvaro García Linera have been enabled by the Supreme Electoral Court to run in primary elections next January 27th and in the general elections on October 2019. The authorization was passed by 4 of the 6 votes from the Electoral Court that has also allowed other 7 political groups to run. This court's decision was taken 2 days before the deadline set by the electoral schedule and surprised a sector of the political opposition that is organizing protests across the country against Morales and Linera's candidacy. The opposition has announced it will continue to protest and will call for a 24-hour strike organized by civic institutions, besides a demonstration in La Paz and also a vigil outside the electoral court. Opposition candidates believe this authorization marks a blow to democracy. Meanwhile, members from Morales' party celebrate their leaders have been allowed by the Electoral Court to participate. They say the Electoral Court has given Bolivia's people the choice on the future government for Bolivia.
Now, Cuba's telecommunications company Itexa will be releasing 4 mobile data packages on Thursday. It will be the first time in 5 years that Cubans will have access to internet outside of public Wi-Fi areas in the park around the island. President Miguel Diaz-Canel championed greater connectivity to boost the economy and enable Cuba to better defend its revolution online. CARICOM leaders have signed a declaration to move towards full free movement in a single market economy within the next 3 years. It's one of several resolutions passed during the 18th Special CARICOM Summit in Trinidad, which wrapped up on Tuesday. Caribbean leaders also agreed to expand the categories of skilled workers free to move within the region. And there was also consensus on Haiti's full integration by 2020.
We considered the implementation plan for Haiti's full participation in the CSME, and we welcome the assistance that that country will receive from the European Development Fund in their efforts to become compliant with the measures to ensure that they can participate in the CSME.
We are cognizant that there is about $47 billion in savings within the community, and that we need to find a way of unlocking those savings such that our businesses and our governments can have access to affordable capital, to borrow at affordable rates, while at the same time giving our citizens and companies better options for greater returns on their money than they're currently getting from keeping that money in savings accounts.
Meanwhile, Jamaica's unemployment rate is currently at a record low, while joblessness among youth has seen a significant decline. Prime Minister Andrew Holness made the announcement at an Action 2018 forum on the island.
2018, July, we saw the lowest reported unemployment rate, 8.4%. Means we would have had the highest number of Jamaicans employed in the history of Jamaica. In particular, youth unemployment declined by 5.3% to now be at 22.2%. These are very encouraging figures.
The Caribbean Court of Justice has closed its 2018 calendar with a record number of rulings. There were 34 to be exact. It's the highest number of judgments delivered in a year since the court began its operations in 2005. The CCJ also heard 28 matters in both its original and appellate jurisdictions. Meanwhile, only 4 Caribbean countries have so far made the CCJ their final court of appeal.
To consider whether.
And the Colombian long and triple jump athlete Catherine Ibargüen has been chosen as the Athlete of the Year 2018 by the International Association of Athletic Federations. At a ceremony held in Monaco, she became the first South American athlete to win the award. Interviewed after the event, she said that she was filled with joy and dedicated the award to her family and the country. Time for the second break in this newscast. World News is after this. Welcome back. France has abandoned the fuel tax hike that was previously suspended for 6 months. The decision follows weeks of massive protests, which saw riots and police repression. The news comes one day after Prime Minister Edouard Philippe said the tax hike should be delayed for 6 months from its planned January 2019 rollout. UK Prime Minister Theresa May is facing a possible defeat in next Tuesday's final Brexit deal vote. Our correspondent in London, Pablo Navarrete, explains.
A day after British MPs voted to find the UK government in contempt of Parliament, the government reluctantly published the legal basis for the Brexit agreement that it had been withholding up to now, and which caused this vote of censure by the British MPs. In a 6-page document released today, Wednesday, the British Attorney General Geoffrey Cox conceded that the issue of the Irish backstop, the prevention of a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, could trap the UK in a repeated and protracted series of negotiations. Now, the release of this information is likely to inflame the pro-Brexit MPs who have called the deal signed by the May government and the European Union a betrayal, essentially, of Britain leaving the EU, because it says it concedes far too much to the EU and gives them too much power over the terms of Britain's exit, which should have been has to be done by the 29th of March. So Theresa May is currently trying to sell her deal effectively to MPs and to the nation, and on Tuesday the 11th of December the Parliament will vote on this deal. Now it currently looks like Parliament will reject the deal, and the release of this information today is likely to inflame further those on the Brexit side of her party who are angry with her and with the deal. So it's basically it is not looking good for Theresa May's ability to pass this deal on Tuesday the 11th of December, which is likely, and the fact that it won't be passed is likely to plunge her government into a further crisis. So these are the latest developments in the Brexit deal negotiations in Parliament.
The two-day meeting between political parties of the BRICS countries has come to an end in South Africa. Over 200 delegates from Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa joined together for talks advocating multilateralism and combating extreme nationalism. Participants also rejected the United States trade war against China and its growing use of economic sanctions as a political weapon. Meanwhile, the jailed former Brazilian president Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has sent a letter to the BRICS meeting to show his support for multilateralism. In the letter, he expressed his concerns with the incoming government of Jair Bolsonaro, especially regarding its close relationship with the United States. He praised that the BRICS countries have achieved together since the group was founded in 2003, but Lula also wrote that he fears that Bolsonaro's foreign policy will dismantle everything the country has already achieved. Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta has vowed to veto a bill by members of parliament to raise their salaries and benefits. Recent maneuvers by the members of parliament to award themselves a hefty salary increase have caused public outrage in a country when more than 30% of the population live in extreme poverty. Kenyan parliamentarians currently earn about $12,000 per month. The United Nations Children Fund has warned that about 1.5 million children in the Central African Republic are in desperate need of humanitarian aid. UNICEF says that children in the CAR are in danger of being recruited by armed groups or becoming victims of sexual violence. And since the president was overthrown in 2013, the country has been plagued with violence and armed clashes between Christian and Muslim groups.
5 years of armed conflict means that the children are in need of aid in essentially all areas today. They are in need of aid from birth until their early childhood in order to have access to primary health and nutrition care. When they are a little older, they need to go to school. They need to be protected against being recruited by armed groups.
Young people in Nepal have created a map of the Dead Sea using plastic bags. Their goal is to set a new international record and raise awareness of plastic polluting the world's oceans. Volunteers tied 100,000 used plastic bags of different colors to a 20-meter-long metal grid shaped like the Dead Sea. The slogan for the record attempt was "One Dead Sea is enough for us." And we come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at talisierenglish.net. And join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Talisie English, I'm Sonie Gray. Thank you for watching.